Okay.
Pleasure.
It's so nice meeting you. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Cool.
I know we
So,
reached out a long time ago, so I'm glad we
yeah,
were able to figure out the technology.
exactly. I really apologize because I had really hoped to meet you guys, but my trip to California got shrunk down to about 48 hours.
Oh my
And
gosh.
2 days I was teaching the workshop, and we missed our flight, our connecting flight coming out. So the workshop almost didn't happen. I literally started the workshop without half of my clothes, half of my artist materials. I had no brushes or anything.
Oh
It was pretty
no.
my materials went in another suitcase. They went to the right destination, but I had to take another destination. And oh man, what a mess. So I
Did you
apologize.
have to buy all new supplies for your
You
workshop?
know, the funny thing is I spent so much of my art career just kind of doing what was necessary sometimes to survive. So I'm not pretentious about what I do. So I could I could go to Walmart and get brushes and still produce what I need to. Uh,
Mhm.
Never been kind of like stuck and had to have everything perfect because life's just not perfect.
Yeah. Well, that's a good philosophy to have.
There is, there is. You got to be on your toes all the time. I got kids, so I know what that's like. So it's like you got to do what you got to do.
Oh my gosh. So, welcome back to the Art World podcast. I'm Miss Art World, Catherine, and I'm super excited because I have a special guest with me. Eric R. Music is interviewing with me through technology. Welcome, Eric.
Hello, hello.
So, Eric is a classical figurative artist, and in 2015 was actually recognized by the Art Renewal Center as a associate living master. And you're amazing. I'm just gonna say that
Very much.
right off the bat. What's your Instagram if someone wants to look you up
Uh,
before?
it's my full name. It's ERICARMUSIK. So it's just my full name, Eric R. Music.
Okay. And before we get into it, I do want to say to most of my listeners, you are very different than what I do. Like, I'm a conceptual artist, I do performance work, very different than what you do, which is classical figurative painting. And for those people who have listened to the podcast before, will know that I'm very critical of classical painting.
Sure.
But that being said, I grew up as a classical painter, and it wasn't until I was in college that I kind of switched up. And so let's get into your history, and then we can talk about your artwork. So take us all the way back to the beginning in Pennsylvania.
My beginnings, I guess you could say, from an early childhood, I was always drawing. I was probably my earliest experiences with drawing was just about taking every book in my house. My mom would always buy lots of books on, airplanes and sharks and dinosaurs and anything else. And I seemed to always gravitate to all these books because they always had a first page and a last page that were blank. And I've always drawn everything. I thought, well, that's just free, like a sketch pad. So you could just draw on all of them. So literally I had a whole bookshelf of just, books that were covered in drawings. And, I draw just anything any young boy would have drawn, dinosaurs and stuff and spaceships. And, but I just kind of, continued that on through grade school and stuff and started winning art competitions, even in kindergarten. But no real training. I never had any training all the way through high school or anything else. It wasn't until I got the chance to go to college that I actually started receiving some kind of background and some kind of training. And, additionally, like starting out with charcoal work and then eventually moving on to painting. As a kid, I was like, well, what do I need to go to school for? I know how to draw. And I didn't know anything, I'm still learning at 46. But it was a good opportunity once I got into school to actually formalize that and to start learning art history and things like that, which I had no access to growing up. I mean, I had history I was into, but no real understanding of, those people that stood there before me in this profession. So that was really great. And college was fantastic at Penn State. Wasn't necessarily at all centered on classical art. Actually was kind of told by a couple of my professors I really respected that if I decided to pursue this kind of art, that I'd never have a career, which, was kind of hit pretty hard, especially after you dump 40 grand on a college education and your professor tells you that. It's like, fantastic, thanks. But the kind of last laugh to it is, I have made a profession of it for the last 25 years. And my art is now valued at least where his art was when I was in school. So, and I've become a little more recognized for that style of art that I've decided to pursue it, throughout my career. Stylistically, I would say that it's something I really didn't realize until I was maybe even out of college, was that, I did have some inspiration, even though I grew up in the coal mining region of Northeast Pennsylvania. Very, very post-industrial kind of landscaped everywhere. I mean, there's just huge mountains of column, which is like, waste coal kind of, stuff that they would have thrown away. They wouldn't have had in the industry. So you see these big black mountains with all these old structures of mining and stuff there. They were abandoned, long before I was even, a kid. But it was, that access wasn't there, but I grew up Roman Catholic, so I went to church, and it was a very, it wasn't a very rich area at all, but the area was predominantly Slavic. So a lot of those people came from, Poland and Lithuania and Slovakia and all these other countries. But the churches were beautiful. The homes were just built to just house these miners and stuff. They were nothing special in a lot of the areas. But the churches were beautiful. Like, you'd walk in there and it was like an art gallery, And so as a kid, every Sunday I'm getting this inspiration all over me, and mass is going on. I'm just looking at the ceilings, the walls, like everything's just brilliantly covered and really old, traditional, dramatic kind of art. So I didn't realize the impact of that until in college I got the chance to live in Italy for a while and study, the old masters and to go around and see all those things. So I think something kind of connected there. I was like, wow, there is something I'm really drawn to. And it was that figurative, that presence of everything, that really big, dramatic, larger than life kind of thing, whether it was mythological art, historical or religious art. I was really, really impacted by that. And so that became my understanding, I think, moving into this profession. It was maybe a few years into being a professional that I really started understanding what I wanted to paint. Kind of art school, they didn't really understand me. So I think I started connecting a few years after, and 25 years later, here I am.
And that was one of my questions for you, because when I went into college for my BFA, I was a traditional painter, portraiture, and I got that kind of backlash from my professors. Like, that's great. I'm glad you're technically able to paint.
Yeah.
But what are you going to say? Like, what's the message behind your artwork? And so one of my questions for you was, I noticed you have your BFA, but you don't have your Master's of Art. Is that something that you've thought about? Like, why get a Master's of Art when you're just going to be hit with that same kind of criticism? Like, oh, that's not what the art world is all about right now.
Yeah, I did entertain it for a little while, and I actually did apply even outside of school in my first year. But I kind of, when I left school and I started diving deeper and understanding myself and understanding who I was, I think that I started really connecting with my purpose. And I think that's the strongest and most dangerous thing you could have is a purpose, that you truly, not an ideology that you adopt, but a real purpose.
Mm-hmm.
You start to understand yourself and you start to go, okay, if I'm real honest, can I be that person? Can I be that person out in public? and yeah, that's who I am. I don't filter my life. I mean, I've always just given who I am, and I started doing the things that they said I couldn't, and it didn't hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to realize, I'm like, so am I just making this little bubble of people that are in an MFA program or a BFA, whatever it was, that little room full of all the professors that would do your critiques? Am I just here to make them happy? Or do I truly want a purpose? Do I truly want to make myself happy? And I did. And as I said, I started making those connections and understanding. You know, at one point my wife told me early on, she goes, if you're able to paint this kind of art, why aren't you doing it?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a painful question, because you know what it is. You go to school and you listen, you're like trying to please this person and that person. And I remember a couple of times, like I went to one of my last critiques. I had this painting when I left Italy. I came back after my stay in Italy. I spent 3 months on this thing. It was an enormous, huge figurative painting, like 6 foot by 8 foot. I mean, I came back from Rome and I was like, I'm doing everything, you know,
Yeah.
I just around the world, you know. And I thought, wow, I'm just creating the greatest thing. I'm really going to impress all of them. And I remember putting that in a critique, and then there was another class assignment that I did for somebody else that was in that critique, and it had something to do with, like, I don't know, I think it was painting little figures, naked figures all over different parts of the art building. Like I painted like a little figure in the ashtray or down the one of the hallways and stuff. And the one professor was like, that work is so much better than the work you're doing now. Like this 3-month-old masterpiece that I thought I created, that little work that was like done in 10 minutes here and there was better than that. I'm like, what the hell, what's going on here, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that kind of left with me after I left art school. That kind of tagged on with me for a while. And I started doing a couple paintings, and I was not productive. I was unhappy. I was creating art for someone else, like some kind of like, is someone going to like me if I do this kind of stuff? And that's just so disingenuous. You know, I mean, you really need to be yourself. You know, people will know. People can tell right away if you're being a phony. You know, and whatever that is, it does. I mean, whatever your mode of art is, your medium that you choose, you know, you got to be yourself, and that's already like, that's most of the game. You know, if you can do that. So I guess, you know, in connecting with that after school, and then, you know, realizing that that was my purpose. That was what I felt good about. Once I started painting like that, my desire to get better at it got more and more intense, and it's been a lifelong process now. Like I have a reason to create. I could spend the rest of my life and be happy getting better at what I'm doing right now. And that's exciting. Like I love Monday mornings. I jump in the studio. I can't wait to start. I can't wait. I'll work all day long for 20 hours. And I'll get up and do it again. I mean, I can't get tired. Love it.
And you've been very successful at doing what your purpose has been. And I think that's really important for artists to understand is you can go to art school and your professors can tell you, do this, change this, this is not the right way to do it. But you, if you are, like you were saying, staying true to exactly what you want, that makes you unique and allows you to be successful versus other artists who are just playing the art market game.
Yeah, very much.
So quick question, just out of curiosity, were your parents artsy, or were they supportive of you going to school for art?
I had the same parents everybody else has who's an art student. What did your parents tell you? Were they worried?
Oh, my dad's a painter, so he was overjoyed that I was going to art.
I had the parents that were like, what are you going to do with that? You know, my parents are both college educated. My dad was a horticulture major. My mother was an English major. Sadly, neither of them used their degrees. My mother became a mom and stay-at-home mom. I don't think she ever wanted to go into the teacher unions or anything. There's always the excuse she gave. My father got out of school right around the Vietnam era and couldn't get a job, couldn't get recruiters to the campus and anything. So he eventually went into construction to support us because he ended up having children, a year after he got married in 72. So He started finding his living, doing construction instead. And then years later, I ended up joining him about 11 years later after I was born. And I worked with him all those years. So I think my father thought I was going to be, he was kind of encouraging me to go in architecture, which I love architecture as well. I think I'm fascinated by it. Some of my art history degree really focused on that. And he seemed viable to him because I would build homes with him, so I could read plans and build houses. So, I was, very physically invested in the profession with my father, but at the same time, he wanted me to go and get an education and not work in anything manual. I did, and I still came back and I bought a home, and I've been restoring it for 20 years. So I mean, I'm still doing construction in some way, but he didn't understand it. And I think it took years later for him to finally start getting it. I mean, he kind of supported me early on with, a little bit of help early on, kind of getting me some supplies and stuff like that. But I had to pretty much make it myself. He couldn't. He had some connections and stuff, but my father wasn't as extroverted as I had to be, I had to learn to be. So it really wasn't anything that could have springboarded me in any way. So I kind of had to figure all this out myself without any support at all.
Mm-hmm. And you said you didn't take an art class until college?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't pick up a paintbrush until I was in my junior year of college. I was 20 years old. It was the first time I had never painted before that. Never had the chance. I mean, a lot of high school art programs are, like craft programs. I mean, didn't really learn to draw. Didn't really learn anything until college. So that was, once I did, I really didn't know what kind of artist I wanted to be until I think that I started doing painting. When I was doing some figure drawing before it, I realized I wanted to do figurative work. I enjoyed that. And that seemed natural. But when I took one class in painting, I was like, wow, this is fantastic. And I had to apply to the Bachelor of Fine Arts program, which was pretty competitive at the time. They said, usually took you a couple times to get in. And I got in my first try. So I thought, wow, I'm fantastic. I painted like 3 or 4 paintings, and the first critique, the next semester, they destroyed me. Absolutely most embarrassing moment of my life. I was like, wow, I don't know anything. And I started doubting myself pretty hard, but yeah. And again, I rebounded from that. So.
Well, and you have on your website and your YouTube, so you have a blog on your website, and you have a YouTube channel that has a variety of different playlists. And you talk about, I have it written down. So one of the recent blog posts that you did was what to do when you hit rock bottom. And I love that you have a blog and you are doing YouTube channels that encourage artists or have a way for other artists to get into your mindset, because you've been through critiques, you've had those terrible, embarrassing moments. Is there a reason why you feel so passionate about sharing that with other artists?
Very much. I don't get paid to blog. I don't get paid to do any of that stuff. I do believe in tithing anything I can in my life to try to help others. I mean, it's just kind of the way I was brought up. But more than anything, I realized when I got out of art school, you're just dropped on the corner, with all your stuff, and you're like, what the hell do I do with this now? Like, my last week of art school, the professors took us in a room and said, okay, we're going to tell you basically about how to make it as an artist. You'll do 30 things and maybe get one of them to work. Try to get into some shows, and that's about it. Try to get into a gallery. I was like, wow, okay, so all this work, and now I'm being told that. And that was really just the advice. So you started with that advice. This is pre-internet, a couple years before. We were lost, totally lost. And thank goodness, a few years later, the internet, in 97, I started getting involved in it. So you started making some connections, meeting other artists, which is just fabulous. You can't even imagine what it was like before that. Being able to talk to people and kind of share information and ask for help and stuff. And I remember asking a couple, pretty heavy hitting artists that are around now. They were just starting to make their break, when I was getting involved, and asked so many of them for help. And it was like never any response, never willing to help. You just felt like, wow, this is meaningless. This is, what the hell am I going to do with this? And it really, really hurt. And I thought to myself, I said, you know what? Okay. Like I always had to, I'm going to have to, my wife and I, she's my only real support I've ever had. We're going to just pick up. We're going to figure this out ourselves. But someday, if I ever get down that road, I'm not going to be that guy. I'm not going to be that same person. It's like, I worked so hard for this. I'm not telling you. I'm not telling you anything. You go find it out yourself. Because I've still heard that even in some of the connections I've made in the last year. In some interviews, I get off the phone with some of these people and they said, listen, I'm really glad that you've been so transparent about this, because you wouldn't believe how many artists I interview, and they start revealing about some of the secrets that they've divulged throughout the interview. They'll literally ask for that information to be stricken from the interview, like edited out.
Wow.
And I'm like, wow, that is such garbage. I mean, I work with people from around the world. I teach, I consult. I mean, I've got people that I've taught from China, people, I have a student tomorrow morning from Switzerland, Cyprus, all across the United States, Canada, everywhere, South America. We wouldn't believe how common everybody's problems are. They're all the same. Doesn't matter how young or how old. And all they want to do is be listened to. I mean, why can't people just be real? Everybody's talking about compassion. They're normal people. They're just asking questions. What does it hurt to help?
Mm-hmm.
And again, that comes down, as I said, my intentions are certainly I want to succeed as much as possible so that I can share that with my family and someday maybe even their family and their family, just pass it on. I don't have anything I need out of this life. I'm so grateful and blessed. But if I can, during the time that I'm here, help others to achieve that, it'd be a sin not to. You know what I mean? It would be horrible to have that information and not share it. And so that's why, I do the consulting end of it and everything else, but I like sharing the videos because, again, not everybody can invest in it. I remember trying to market myself for how many years with no money. Never had a dollar to put towards my marketing. You got to figure out how to do it. You got to work hard. And I try to be very honest with it. I don't sugarcoat it. I try to just give the basic, honest, assessment of what I've had to do. And I hope that in some way it helps. And I'm so happy to hear people achieving, coming back with good stories. One of the most common ones are like, geez, you know what? I really needed to hear this right now. You hear somebody like that, I'm like, I remember those feelings. I remember being on my knees. I mean, the 25 years I've been in this profession, several times I've been knocked on my ass so hard, I can't even tell you. I mean, I have a family of three children. My wife and I are married 22 years. I have everything I need, but I work for them. And when things don't work out for me, it's not just I'm the only one that falls. They fall with me. So it's a tremendous responsibility. And I hate to feel that pain, but if I can, share that experience with somebody else to tell them like, listen, you're not the only one. I was there. I did it. This happened to me too. So it's going to be okay. Just clear your mind, find a way to just not self-deprecate and get back up. It's the whole Rocky Balboa thing. I think I mentioned it a couple of times in there, take the hit and get back up.
Mm-hmm.
You got to succeed in this business. You got to take a lot of hits and you got to get back up, and you'll find yourself to be stronger every single time. You get stronger skin, thicker skin, and you continue to get stronger and more confident. I mean, it all grows from something, and I hope that maybe these blogs and videos, everything just push people in that direction. Because, I mean, there's so many terrible things in life. Art shouldn't be one of them. You shouldn't have pain because of art. You know what I mean? So.
Have you ever been in a point in your life where you were gonna give up on art, or you were just done with it when you felt so discouraged?
Yes, many times. I would say, especially, there's different plateaus you hit in your life. You get a little success in the beginning, you start to feel good, and then something happens. There were many times early on when I really didn't know enough about myself. Like you find out a lot about yourself while you're working. Early on, it's just very frustrating because you're just like, I just want a shot. Just somebody give me a shot.
Mhm.
And it builds. You gotta keep firing and keep learning about yourself. Like I couldn't even write a real artist statement for myself until many years in my career. I'm like, who the hell am I? I know who I am now. I can explain that person easy now. But when you're just starting out, you're like, who the hell am I? You're trying to adopt somebody else's experiences, but you have none. You know what I mean? You're like, what do you say to somebody about your life experience at 20? Like you just don't have it. But later on, you start going, yeah, this is what I love. This is who I am. And so, yeah, it got tough. And there was a number of times, even in recent years and stuff, like you want to just keep progressing. And it can be difficult sometimes. There's shows you think you should get into that you don't. There's acknowledgments that you believe you deserve, but someone doesn't give them to you. There's commissions or sales of your art that seem like they're going to happen and then they don't happen. Those kinds of things are common. All artists deal with that, and they can be gut wrenching, especially when someone's the mortgage company's asking for your money and you're like, I thought I had a commission but I don't. Like those kinds of stresses in life, and keeping your electric on and your food in your fridge and your bills paid and all that stuff. Like all of that puts pressure on this. I've lived that. I've taken that chance, and it's the most wonderful thing in the world. To walk away from your job finally and say, what the hell with you. And it's even better when you walk away and you find out that the next year you make more than you were making at that job that you hated.
Mm-hmm.
That feels great. But it's always tremendous responsibilities are in between. And I guess the advice I give is you have to realize there'll be failures, and they make the successes 10 times better. Like if you just succeeded all the time, what the hell how would you know? How would the fun be? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like I want to sell a painting and buy my kid a house, one of my children a house. Like I want to be that successful where that happens. Like that's a lifetime goal. But to be able to sell anything, feels fantastic now, to sell a painting for something that I didn't think I could aspire to, each time. But it does come from a lot of those disappointments, and I tell everybody, just keep going, just get up and keep going. If you believe in it, the only time you fail is if you quit. Mm-hmm. And that the world is filled with people who are on their deathbed thinking about, God, if I would have just stayed with it instead of giving up. Like, I don't want to be one of those people that have those regrets. I want to live my dreams, be the best father, be the best husband in the world to my kids, even more than my art career. And I want to live that life, and I'll do anything for it. And that's the kind of commitment people need. And that'll get you through all those hard times.
That's amazing. So take me back. So you graduate and you're trying to figure out what you want to do. Where's the timeline and how you start becoming successful and you start getting into your groove?
I got out and I realized that obviously I couldn't pay my bills with my art career that hadn't even started. So I thought, well, I'll find an art-related profession. And it took me a little while. Early on, I had to go back and do a little bit of construction just because I had that experience. I could run a crew of people, and I was young, but I had a lot of experience. I had started from the time I was like 9. So I eventually got into some graphic design, doing some graphic design art, and that was good. I got in a couple positions where they were kind of teaching you on the job. So I kind of pushed my way in. I had a little bit of experience, kind of over-exaggerated that little experience so I could get the door, but I was really willing to learn. So I was like a sponge with all of it. So I just learned everything I needed to do and more and became good at that. So, and that really helped later on because, you know, there's so many parts of my life where I had to learn something I didn't know. And that job became something that I use today. You know, like my construction experience, I build custom frames, huge frames for some of these big commissions. Graphic design work, I can build a website, I can market myself, I can do my own branding. So that's pick anything. You know, don't feel bad about it. Have your art career on the stove simmering, you know, and do that work consistently through. I would work from get up at 6 a.m, go to a job, come home at like, you know, 4 or 5, have dinner and stuff. And I would work until 2 o'clock in the morning. And I would get up again at 6 and start the whole thing over. So I had a business running while I was working for somebody else. And I would take, instead of all, you know, everybody at the office and stuff would go out to lunch and stuff, I'd stay back at the office and just work on my stuff. Or if I couldn't work in the office, I'd literally go out into the parking lot. I remember some commissions I literally painted on my steering wheel. Like I would just set the work there and work, you know, in that half hour or an hour, wherever it was. I believed in it that much. I was not, everybody was there to work. And I have another blog out there that's something like 10 things to do when you want to leave your job, something like that. I wrote last year. But it talks about that, you know, using their time. I would use, you know, cell phone. When this in 2008 came around, I had the first iPhone in every generation from then. I'd be sitting there all day. Like if I could sneak down the hall, like on the way to break, I'd be putting posts up, you know, I'd sneak away into a hallway or whatever it was, or, you know, before work, after work. I mean, I was constantly keeping an operation there that wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
And while, you know, the job wanted me to be there, my mind was somewhere else. I was like, I'm not here to be the best employee. I'm here to be good enough so you don't, I'm going to do my job effectively. I'm going to be a good, you know, employee, but I'm not giving you my soul. No way. And it was good because, you know, later on, I remember before my first child was born, the economy was really bad and we started losing employees. They literally cut, I think, about 80% of my department. I was working for a corporation and it came down, there was like 20 people. It came down to 2 or 3 of us. And they were threatening to fire me like days before my baby was born. I'm like, my
Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
And the political stuff that was happening, people that I really cared about, that I had in my house for dinner, my wife cooked for them and stuff, they were so deceptive, like going in dark rooms and stuff and finding ways to maybe push me out so they didn't get out. And I sat there and I made it through, and it took about 2 or 3 years, and I sat and I just waited. I'm like, someday I'm going to walk out of here on my terms. And I did the one day. I surprised the hell out of them. And I was just like, I'm done. I'm leaving Friday. It was like Wednesday. I'm like, I'm done with this. And I walked out into my profession. I never came back. And it was the best feeling in the world because at that point I was already humming because I had the operation going for years, but then it was, you know, it was my turn to be my own boss.
Was there a moment or factors that went into that decision? Like, how did you know, okay, now's the time that I can leave my day job and really focus on my art career?
You know, a lot of people tell you, you know, oh, you need to put money away and get all that stuff set up and have that smooth transition set up for you. I never had any of that. I didn't have parents giving us money. I didn't have anything. You know, I had a rather large job commission that I had come in, and it looked like a good opportunity at that time. Things were moving along. I was paying a few things ahead, but I didn't really have a good safety net. We've never had a safety net in this house, which has been very scary. But I pushed ahead. I believed in myself. I worked 10 times as hard at home every day. And my wife has always been super supportive and really encouraged me, kind of always was a confidant. And the best part about it was that the year after I left, I made more than where I was working. I had a pretty good job. I made about, I think it was 5 or 10,000 more than I was working for another company. but it was an intuition. It may have been kind of suicide maybe for some people.
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't take it anymore. I really couldn't, and that has been the best part about it. It's the hardest because you have to own up to yourself. You have to be ready for that. And I learned a lot when I did that, because you can't be in a world where you want to blame people. You got to take responsibility for everything. You got to take complete responsibility. Like when things don't happen, you can't bitch about it. You can't tell somebody, oh, it's because of this, and this will never happen because I don't know this person or that person. Like you got to own up to everything. You got to go, it didn't work. You got to try something else.
Mm-hmm.
Working 8 hours a day didn't work. You got to work 10. You got to hit it harder, hit it from many directions. You got to be an entrepreneur, which is what being an artist is. It's an entrepreneur. That's all it is. You got to listen to people. You got to take advice from people who encourage you, not people that will tear you down. You can't be taking advice of critical people, because I've met so many people in this world that know how to do my job better than me, that have all the ideas that I don't have, and they don't do this. They don't do it better. They know everything, but they don't know anything.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be around, and it might be a lot of your family. It might be your family that are just critical at you. You can't take their advice. You just have to go, okay, they had a point 20, 30 years ago. They decided they can't do it. So they're projecting on you that you can.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So, I'm blabbing and I can't remember where your question was.
No, I think that's so important, because ultimately you have to have the most faith in yourself, because if you rely on other people, even the closest people around you, like my husband has always been very supportive, and so is my parents and siblings, but there's always those few people around you that kind of get in your head and create that self-doubt. And
Yeah.
you as the artist have to be so convinced that you're going to succeed, and you'll succeed any way possible.
Absolutely.
So I think what you're saying is really important for artists to hear.
Yeah.
Have you found it difficult to kind of balance the art business side of things and the going in the studio and creating artwork?
Oh, sure. Sure. It can be very difficult. And on top of that, I balance out being a husband and being a father. My wife is here with me all day, every day. So I have a very close relationship with her. I love spending time with her. I love working out with her, walking with her, cooking with her. Like, we spend a lot of time. And I have my kids too, that, I want to be a good presence to them, and help them when they need me. So I have that. And then I teach a lot here. I have 2 days where I teach almost throughout the entire day, people from everywhere around the world. So then I also have studio time and I have marketing time. So I have to kind of balance that back and forth in a way that allows me to get a lot of work done, but keeps me valid out there and a good presence. So you kind of have to do a lot of research about, dealing with social media, dealing with websites, how to put out your information in a way that's going to be effective, so that the little bit of time that you can spend on it is going to be effective. Looking for whether it's peak times. I'm just going to grab a lozenge real quick. You got to look for peak times where, people are going to be seeing your material, and post during those times. You got to have content to share. So it involves a little preparedness. Like, I used to have to prepare almost a day before I put out lists. A lot of times I would use a notebook, write down kind of a list of what I wanted to do day to day. That was very helpful. You try not to set too many goals for yourself in one day. I would try to do, like, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 things in a day, whether it be send an email to so-and-so, post your new artwork here, take photos of this, whatever it was. You try to compartmentalize it so that you can keep your studio time very important, especially when you're starting out. I mean, you got to really spend almost all your time on your studio. I have an apprentice that I'm working with. She's fantastic, but at this point in her career, she's building up her portfolio. that's the most important thing for her. She's learning how to paint and getting better with each painting. She needs to paint 10 paintings like the last really great painting she did. Just keep producing. But as you get more into your groove, you start understanding what kind of art you're creating. I almost had this motto where it was 50 50 50% of your time painting, 50% of your time marketing and getting things together. So I would say I kind of go probably in that realm, 50-50s a lot of times. Though I would like to push, my studio stuff a lot more. At least now I have a little bit of help here. I've got 2 apprentices I'm working with now that have really helped me to kind of push the projects along, especially the Dante series behind me. So that's what I would suggest. You can't get by without marketing.
Mm-hmm.
I live here in Hamburg, Pennsylvania. It's a town of less than 5,000 people. My audience is, I've sold art here, but maybe 5% of the art that I sell is here. I sell it everywhere around the world. How do you get around the world? You got to be online. You got to be creating networks. You got to be branding yourself out there and making a presence. So otherwise, if you're one of those artists that's just sitting in your studio creating a lot of art, the millionaires aren't trolling around going, geez, where the hell is there an art studio where I can buy art? It's not going to happen,
So I did want to ask you about your Dante's Inferno project, because it's very interesting. Can you talk a little bit about that project?
Sure. I began, I considered this concept maybe about 20 years ago when I was just starting out. At the time, I didn't have know like what I needed to do to create it. I didn't understand how to paint as well at that point. Didn't know my materials as well. It was just a lot. And I did a few large commissions in 2014 that involved similar subject matter. And it kind of pushed me to think about the project again. And I said, well, wouldn't it be neat to really bring this story to life? But I mean larger than life. The kind of work that I saw when I was in Italy, I thought to myself, I'm like, today, where are the Michelangelos? Where are the Raphaels? Where are those projects? Where are the damn Sistine Chapel, the Sistine Chapel, commissions? Where is that art today? You see a lot of art that looks really good on the top of a sofa or something like that. But I mean, I wanted to create big stuff. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to create something so large that literally this story came to life around us? And so I conceived of the idea that, it was going to have to be big if it was going to be created. And then I came up with 40 panels based on the cantos that are in just the Inferno at this point. And I started throwing around the idea. And I've read the poem, but I thought, there's no way that I'm going to be able to understand this to the level I want to understand it. I want this art to not be my interpretation of Dante's Inferno. I want it to be an accurate representation of it. So I thought this has to be, it's a bigger project than me. This is way bigger than anything I could ever do. So I started looking into people to maybe be a collaborator for the project, somebody who's an expert. And I got a few people that had, suggested the particular person I'm working with, Dr. Christopher Kleinhans he taught for about 4 decades at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And the man is brilliant. And not only is he brilliant, but he is somebody who's been incredibly kind to me, very supportive. I mean, he could look at me and go, oh, you're just a kid, and what the hell do you know? Yeah, but he was very, very kind, very supportive. He's written I don't even know, at least a dozen books on the subject. I mean, he's a brilliant man. I'll never understand this to that level. So it was great. So we would talk, on the phone and via online, back and forth. And we've kind of come up with this concept. And then eventually what I'm going to do is after I've painted all these, we're going to do a book together. So he'll write the book. I will use these images for illustrations, and we'll release that together. but my goal is to have these in a museum and to do a large show, thinking, something enormous, because, each painting is 4 foot by 5 foot. So you just add those, if they were to be back to back in a line, that's 160 feet of painting. That's more than half a football field. So that's intense, with frames on them and everything else. You need a large size museum to handle it. And it could be one of the greatest representations of the story ever. And that's the kind of goals that I want to set for myself at this point in my career. I want to continue to push the gamut of what's possible. And what's great is that, I'm looking at the story, and a lot of the illustrations you see from Dante's Inferno tends to be like Gustave Doré's, small drawings on those. Everything's black and white, compartmentalized. But when you make them this large, like, they have personalities, they have emotions, just like all my work does. I want my work always to be very emotional, very honest. And so in trying to create these compositions, I literally have to talk to him and say, at this part of the story, what are they thinking? What are they feeling? Excuse me. So that's the challenge. So between the two of us, we're figuring that out. But it's a lot of work. For sure.
How far have you gotten so far?
I am painting panel 9 right now in the corner over here, and I have 10, 11, and 12 right next to them. So out of 40.
Okay.
I've been painting them now since late 2016. I did have a lot of funding in the beginning for the project. I'm kind of, the last year or two has been less, so I've had to go back to doing a lot of commission work too, to keep everything going and supporting the material end of the project and stuff. So while I'm bringing in a lot of work, that's taking time away from that, but I will finish it, one way or another. It's still, I've done some enormous projects here in the studio this year, and so it informs me that this is all, it's all coming. It's all, in its time, it's going to complete. I'll be able to complete the project, but it's a lot of work, real lot of work. So.
And you have a couple ways of how people can support the project if they wanted to, right?
Yep.
So they can purchase a piece in the work or the series. You have a Patreon that people can donate to or join.
Yep.
So if people are interested in getting more information, would you suggest just visiting your website and reaching out to you?
Yeah, I think on the homepage there's a link to that page. I do have the Patreon, like you said. I have some people supporting me through that. I've had some investors come and actually purchase a few of the panels before the series is even over right now, which is great because, I'm sure once they are exhibited and everything else, the value of everything is really looking good. And then I've also been selling some preliminary sketches and things like that as well of different characters in it. So that's been very popular too. And I've had some sponsorships as well from Jerry's Artorama. They've helped me with a lot of these panels. These are Illumicomp panels. So they've been sponsoring me through that, and some paint and everything else. So that's, every little bit helps. It's an incredibly expensive project. Just the panels alone, to get 40 of these panels would be about $12,000.
Holy
so yeah, it's a lot. And can you imagine the paints and materials, brushes and mediums? It's astronomical, but it's going to leave something big behind. That'll be a kind of a career, something you might be known for. You know what I mean? So that's a completely higher expectation than I would have ever understood years ago. But that's the kind of work I want to create. I want to create something memorable, something really fantastic. And it takes a lot of effort and, a lot of confidence. There's ups and downs to all of it, but I'm excited about it.
Is there a reason why you chose Dante's Inferno? Inferno? Oh my gosh, I can't say it.
I think for me, it was kind of natural in the end. I never really thought about it until I did a few pieces before it. I've done a lot of Fall of the Damned kind of paintings. I used to do things like that when I was just starting out. Did a lot of early Christian art and stuff like that, and I do a lot of mythological art as well. And when you look at how this poem was created 700 years ago, like the early conceptions of that environment are very much a blend of those two worlds. You have parts of the Inferno where the Minotaur is in. You have centaurs in part of it. You have other religious imagery in there. You have, Brutus and Cassius, and Judas in it. I mean, there's all these, historical, mythological, religious references that are in this world, and it's fabulous. I mean, it's so, I don't think anything more vivid has been created, and 700 years ago, no less. So what I'm trying to do is make it very true to what the original intention was of it. Again, I could paint, Virgil and Dante wearing Adidas tracksuit suits and, make a modern version of it. So I don't care to. I want to create something very classically informed, make it true to the story. And I don't know, it's an incredible challenge. Try creating a world. You literally have to. I literally had to make parts of the props, like the outfit that Dante has, and like finding ways to illustrate this and make it real. It's like you almost feel like a movie director. I mean, it's incredibly hard. Each painting is an incredibly hard thing. And then can you imagine trying to do 40 of them? It's like one, you can't even allow one to be a masterpiece. Every one has to be damn good. So that's
the same quality of skill.
Exactly. People are going to expect that. You do one good thing, everybody's going to go, well, you dropped the ball in the fifth one. I can't allow that to happen, So it's incredibly tough, but it's fun. It keeps me focused and sharp about it. So I'm glad.
Do you work from models that you bring in?
Yes. I've used models for all these pieces, and I use models for everything that I do. So no matter what the subject matter, there's just no better than having that reference. You gotta, if you want to make it look real, you gotta make it, the best reference you possibly can use. And even trying to create parts of this world, like I'll go and photograph things while I'm out for a walk, and build that world based on real world reference, but increasing the fantasy of it, from that point. It's a good point of departure. So
so I wanted to talk a little bit about the Art Renewal Center. Can you talk a little bit more about what that is, and are you very much involved with that, or was it just the award that they gave you? Like how?
I've always been, I've always admired the organization very much in the beginning. When I left art school, figurative art really wasn't that popular. There was a couple people doing it when I was in art school, you'd see here and there, but it was generally frowned upon. It's been a lot more accepted in the recent years. You start to see a lot more academies, a lot more ateliers, springing up everywhere. This knowledge is kind of coming back, being more widespread. So the ARC was one of the early organizations that was, they were pushing that. Fred Ross, the person who had founded the organization, really was trying to bring all of this back. There was a certain part in art history when Impressionism kind of took over. There was a lot of art from that point that got just completely sidelined at that point. All the academic art, which was everything, that was the system, was replaced. The Impressionism and Expressionism and all these other artistic styles, modern artistic styles, kind of became in vogue. So his initial intention was to kind of highlight all of those, the pre-Raphaelites, the French academics, And I appreciated that because it was like, geez, it wasn't anywhere else. Like no one was looking at this. No one was saying, yes, this is great art. You know, I mean, they didn't teach it when I was in art school, in art history class. It was like art history, you know, began and ended here. You know what I mean? It was like from the time Monet came around, nothing else was around, you know?
Oh.
Like, you know, so that kind of sucked because here I got an art history minor. I wanted to double major at one point, but I wanted to graduate too. So I didn't follow along with it, but I graduated art school without even knowing about a lot of these artists. And when I became introduced to a lot of them, it just blew my mind. I was like, these were things that I didn't know were possible. You know, there's such great art from some of those artists. And so I really engaged with them right away. And they started doing a yearly competition where a salon, it was an international competition, and they would kind of bring all the great artists from around the world and kind of see, you know, put them together and, you know, have a good competition. And I started getting into the competition, and eventually I ended up almost winning, you know, a top award. I ended up winning a Chairman's Choice Award in this year, the 1 year, for my painting Odysseus and the Sirens. And it was a tremendous honor. I mean, to be recognized among all these. I mean, these are the best of the best. These are people who, you know, lived in New York City, studied in France. You know, here I am, this kid from a coal miner town. You know, and I'm showing and winning. You know, in that crowd. You know, and I'm just like, wow, this is fantastic. You know, and eventually, you know, became part of as one of their recognized artists at this point. And it's truly an honor because it's a real short list, and it's the best of the best. You know, it's people that are, you know, many decades my senior, and people with big resumes and big client lists and everything else. So to be among those people, people that I've admired, is quite an honor. So it's just another point I want to keep continuing that progression in my career, but very, very nice to be recognized by them.
Mm-hmm. I have a two-part question. So I know that I think you minored in or emphasized your art history minor in Baroque art. Is that
Yes.
right? Do you have a favorite artist from that time, or actually any of the classical periods that you're just like, this is the artist that is amazing?
Caravaggio, absolutely. Like beginning and end, definitely. I was able to, I mean, from the very first art history class I saw, I think it was the Calling of St. Matthew or whatever it was, and I was like, wow, like who is this guy?
Mm-hmm.
And a year and a half later, I got, as I said, to live in Italy for a semester and study, and I saw 12 of his paintings while I was there. There's a couple of them I had to do on days off from school there. I literally had to take a train to some obscure church somewhere to see a couple of these. I think it was the crucifixion of St. Peter and the conversion of St. Paul. Two enormous, beautiful paintings. And it was in this small chapel. Like, I didn't even know I had the right place. And I just showed up in this small area. And I think you had to put the equivalent of a quarter in to have the scene lit for like 5 minutes. So I sat there in the pew, and I just said every 5 minutes I'd go up and put another quarter.
Oh my gosh.
I sat with it for like an hour or two. And I was, you know, I mean, his work is just so incredible to see in person. I mean, I have several books on his work, but I've always admired how honest he was with his figures, you know, his people. In his time, you know, he was painting religious subject matter that, you know, it was always very idealized, you know. For him, he's using real models. He's bringing real people into this and showing real emotions going on with these people. So for me, that's always been my goal, is to have that kind of art, you know, whether it's a mythological piece or religious piece, whatever it is, whatever the subject matter. I want you to know that person. You know, we're human beings. We're very complex. We're very emotional. You know, we're always, you know, looking at some of these people like they're larger than life, you know, and like I said, people aren't born great; they become great. They get that by experience in this world, and they have good times and bad times. There's saints that are bigger screw ups than we are, but they found something better, and aspire to better. There's tragic stories in poetry and mythology and history in general where horrible things happened, and what happened right before that person was called great. Show me the night before what that person was going through, and that's the kind of art that Caravaggio created. His saints had dirty feet, his people were imperfect like we are, you know what I mean? And that's what I love about that kind of art. And that's the kind of art I want to create. And he died at an early age. I mean, he was a violent man. He was in trouble all the time. He was wanted for murder. He killed somebody. He was such a flippant person. How many great things would he have created if he lived into his 40s and onward? I just think that kind of passion, that kind of dramatic art, that's the kind of art I want to create. Intense art. And I don't care if you love it or you hate it, you'll have a reaction to it. I don't want it to be wall art that people walk by, That's the kind of art that I think that he created. That's what inspires me.
You can definitely see at least his ability with the figures, to be honest, and the amazing technique that he had with light, like the dramatic lighting. I definitely see it within your work. You had a couple pieces I was looking at where it was, I can't remember the title, but she had like this glowing orb crown thing on her head. Yeah. It was just so beautiful because it looked like it was, actually glowing. And it's amazing to have that ability to make something look so kind of like you can reach out and touch it. Okay, I have one more follow-up question before I take up too much of your time.
Sure.
So like I said at the very beginning, like I'm very different than you are as far as my art practice. Do you have someone that is working more on the conceptual side that you appreciate their artwork? Like I know for me, your work is different, but there's such a appreciation for what you do and your technique and your ability, even though we're so different. Like my father, I said, is a painter, and he's a technical, beautiful painter. And he always thinks that because my artwork is so different that I don't consider him an artist. I can't explain to him like, no, just because I'm doing something so incredibly different than what you're doing does not mean that I think you're not an artist. So I was wondering if there's anyone that you follow or that you like that is completely different than what you're doing.
Oh, that's a tough question. I mean, there've been a number. I mean, going to art school in general, I mean, I didn't see much that was in my realm. I more had to identify with that after school. So a lot of the people, even in the painting program I was with, were performance artist based and things like that, and conceptual in that aspect as well. And there are people that I enjoy, here and there. I'm kind of, I wouldn't say I'm stuck, but more than anything, like I said, I'm kind of drawing from the past more than anything in my art. There's modern work that I like here and there. I mean, it would be more from a piece by piece kind of standpoint. I think for me, I would say just as a catch-all, it really doesn't matter what style it is. It doesn't matter, what medium it is. It could be architecture. It could be, sculpture, or anything else. I like anything that really has a great impact, a great dramatic impact. I like craft in whatever it is. If you're going to put the time in the craft and actually make something that seems like you really put effort into it, like I'm not into art that if you just take some garbage you found from outside and you throw it into a gallery, that you say, oh, that's a great effort. To me, everybody has their own preferences. I don't say that anybody can't like that, but for me, I go, that to me doesn't have the value of putting hard work into something. You can make a modern sculpture that, isn't figurative, isn't anything, but you put effort into it and you present it and, do it in a way that shows class, shows intention. I'll always appreciate it. I know how hard it is to do things that I don't know how to do. I mean, I can appreciate what you're doing. I can appreciate what a sculptor does, what a musician can do, or a performance artist can do that I have no ability to do. I've seen some incredible, installations and stuff that are just, blow my mind. I go, wow, that's fantastic. Like I like the aspect of effort. So I guess, without being specific, I guess that's where my bias, so to speak, would end up. I am the type of person that's like, everyone teach his own. I'm not a totalitarian person. It's like, you got to do figurative painting or you're nothing. It has to be, for me to really get my heart, my soul into it. I like to see that you've put time into something that can be appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
Not fingernails on a chalkboard and saying it's music. You know what I mean? It's easy to destroy. It's easy to mock and rip something apart. It's really hard to create something from your soul. And to each his own, whatever that is. I appreciate that aspect of it. So sorry to not be specific.
No, you're fine. I think it's important, like even going back to your Dante's Inferno project, is something great. Something that you make that's going to be great takes time, energy, effort. I think a lot of people get frustrated because of the demands of Instagram, where you're trying to get out work immediately and as fast as possible, and you kind of lose that idea of, hey, this project can take 3 years and at the end of it, it's going to be a masterpiece.
Yeah.
Versus doing something in a week that doesn't have the same kind of importance and skill that went into it. And there is a difference between the effort and energy and skill level that went into both. And it's very telling when you look at artwork that someone has spent, like you, going to Italy, studying the masters, perfecting your skill, versus someone that didn't put in the same amount of energy and effort and they're trying to do figurative work. Like I can't stand when I go into a museum and I get hung up. Like the piece is beautiful, but the hand's funky. Like I think that's very distracting because I want to be engulfed into this piece, but the skill's just not quite there. And I want the artist so badly to just, come on, you can refine it and make this piece just so much more powerful. But so
that's the tough thing about it, and that's where I try to kind of come in with, I mean, there's times when people don't push themselves hard enough. That's certainly one issue. And I see a lot of people doing that. People constantly come to me, how do you make a realistic figure? Well, what are you doing now? Well, okay, the work you're doing is pretty good. You're just not finishing it. But you got to keep going, keep pushing it harder. That's one aspect of it. And then, there's others who just don't know that next step. So where do they go? Then I try to put myself out there for that group too, and help, just try to get them to that next step on the ladder, because there's so much of that in this world. Like there's so much. I mean, I played music years ago, and I know there was some of that problem in there, like where people would make it big and not lend a hand. But there's a lot of it in this business, and there's millions of us. There's more people in this business than the business can support.
Yeah. And
that sucks. It really does. But it's the truth. But there's a lot of people in this business that can succeed. There's room for everybody to succeed. People told me years ago, I have no outlook, no business that could possibly could be there for me because of the style of work that I'm doing. But somehow I found it. Somehow somebody else will find success in another area that someone said can't be found because they'll persist and keep going. I don't believe in a zero-sum game. I don't believe because I'm successful, you can't be. I don't believe that. I think that's silly. I think that's loser thinking. You need to believe that there is a place for all of us. I want to see everybody I've helped. I want to see all of them succeed more than me. I want to see them all get out there and do everything.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's room for everybody. So I don't know. In some way, maybe I hope that my time here, I'll be able to kind of pass that along and pay it forward. So anyhow, sorry.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing all your insight and taking the time to interview with me. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Before, so you shared your Instagram, but what's your website so people are looking for you?
Okay, it's my fullname.com. So it's Ericarmusik. Music. It's ERICARMUSIK.com. And I'm on there. I'm on Pinterest, Facebook, everything you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, YouTube. I think you're on Tumblr as well.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, YouTube. I'm even on a bunch of obscure ones. So look me up anywhere. I usually will respond to messages and stuff. It's getting a little more difficult lately, but I try to keep up with people. So.
And one thing that I thought was really cool that you offer is lessons or workshops online. So if someone wants to work with you,
Yes.
They can connect with you online and you can work with them.
Yeah, I work with people from all over the world. Actually, most of my students do not live locally. I have people, as I said, tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. I've got somebody from Switzerland. Then I have somebody from here. Then I have somebody from Albany, New York. And then I have somebody from Oklahoma. So, I mean, I pull them in from all over the world. If you have a laptop or a phone or something like that to be able to stream through FaceTime or Google Hangouts, I can teach anybody anywhere. So it's a fantastic opportunity. It's the same kind of teaching I do here. Very pragmatic approach to my career. I share that information. I only teach you what I use. It's not about theory and all this stuff they teach you in school. It's about a way to create art to be able to make a business. And if it's not for business, for a way to just make better art faster without overcomplicating things. I'm very, as you see, I'm very simple, a very simple-minded kind of approach to art. It's technical, but not over-technical so that you can't understand it and employ it in your work immediately. So,
Mm-hmm.
But and I have a special right now for new students. So yeah, go to my website, check it out, and if you have any questions, anybody certainly drop me a line. I'm always here to answer anything.
Great. And thank you so much, everyone, for listening. As always, you can find our Instagram page, Miss Art World Podcast, and we have our website, theartworldpodcast.com. So remember to keep following us, and as always, love you guys.
Take care.